Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk. I am your host, Lee, as usual, and I am extremely honored. I have Jesse Jacobi. His Instagram tag is Pit of Bones, but I have him on the channel today. But yeah, I found his art through Tomb Mold, and I was just blown away the first time I saw it. And since then, I've now seen his work on the newest Tomb Mold record, as well as he's done some work with Spirit Adrift, Mutually Assured Destruction on Triple B Records. But man, in terms of his painting style, you guys are in for a treat. He is one of the big up and comers in the scene in terms of getting published, but in terms of his craft and his technical ability, he's really become an inspiration, especially as I've been poring over his work. So without further ado, I'm going to let Jesse onto the stage. How's it going, man?
Hey, I'm all right. How are you?
Doing great.
Good. Happy to be here.
So I remember you're on the East Coast. I'm in Atlanta. Where are you located?
Okay. I am just north of Detroit, actually. So,
you're really far north then.
I am. Yeah, I'm across the country, but pretty much directly north of you, I guess. So, having a nice, cold, depressing autumn morning here.
Have you always lived in Michigan?
Yeah, whole life. I haven't really been many places. So I hope to change that someday. But yeah, I was born here, moved around a lot when I was a kid, but I've been living near the Detroit area in the suburbs and so on for the last almost 20 years. So,
wow, yeah. I was actually born in Lansing, but I moved to Atlanta with my family when I was 3. So I was kind of like raised by, Ohio, Michigan type of family, but in the South. So I kind of have that type of upbringing.
You get the idea then, I'm sure.
A little bit, yeah. Well, cool, man. Now, I recall, do you have a gallery showing, or you're part of a show this coming Friday?
Yeah, it's going to be, this coming Friday. I guess that would be, I think it's November 3rd. And that's in Philadelphia at a gallery called Arch Enemy Arts. They are kind of the only gallery I've worked with in any meaningful capacity over the years. I don't really do much gallery stuff. It's kind of funny because I was doing a bit more of it earlier in my painting career. The first couple of years, I was sort of more, I don't want to say chasing it, because I've never gone to great lengths to do that. But I guess I thought it would be cool to like be in galleries and stuff, and it is. But it's often there's a lot of cost involved, like I just can't always make that happen. A lot of logistical back end things that go into making a painting presentable for a gallery, paying for framing, paying for shipping, all of this stuff. It's just not always doable. And plus, I don't know. I feel like my work is in this weird in-between space where I kind of don't belong in galleries.
Yeah.
Maybe you know what I mean. It's like
your style is like, it could be classified as illustration, but then there's a lot of fine art techniques to it. So it's extremely well executed, but a lot of times it is, a little more commercial leaning, but with like the more out of the box, surreal type shit.
Yeah, and there's weird stuff in there. It's heavily indebted to genre media, which I think the traditional art world is not so hot on. But at this point, I feel very comfortable just doing my own thing. And if a gallery wants some pieces, then I'm not chasing anything. I'll put it that way. But Arch Enemy is good. I have a good relationship with them, and they've been kind enough over the years to repeatedly invite me back. I sometimes even have to, turn them down because I just have other things going on. But I try at least once a year to like hook up with them and do something. So if you're in Philadelphia, go check it out. They're a great gallery. They have stuff.
Unfortunately, this is probably going to air like a month and a half after as I'm thinking about it. So,
Oh, well,
but you're giving them a plug.
Nice. Yeah, you missed out.
Sorry about that. I was just thinking out loud. So where did when did you start taking painting and art seriously? And if you don't mind, how old are you now?
Yeah, I actually just turned 36 yesterday.
Well, you're not that much older than me.
No.
I'm 32.
Yeah, you're getting up there, bud. I guess, I've been dabbling my entire life, really. I guess it started like anyone, like as a kid, just that was just kind of what I gravitated towards, was drawing little pictures.
Yeah.
Monsters and so on, crazy kid stuff. Later, as like a younger person, 10, 11, 12, I think, I was really into video games. I remember just kind of like so many people, I imagine, just like copying characters from games, or like, drawing Dragon Ball Z characters or whatever,
Yeah,
all that stuff.
Touched on my generation,
Yeah, exactly. I can't escape it. There's no shame there. So that's, I guess, back then what I cut my teeth on. And in high school, I was dabbling too. And, at that point I had kind of like stopped just aping other media and was starting to do my own thing with pencils and charcoals and stuff. Those are all things that if I saw them now, it would probably make me want to die. But
yeah,
how that goes. But, I started painting maybe around the age of like 21. I got some paints. I don't really know what spurred me to do it, other than I kind of felt like I just felt compelled to, I guess, for lack of a.
Was it acrylic at the time too?
Yeah. Started with acrylic, and kind of just screwed around for like a year or two. But I was young. I was living in like effectively a party house with a couple dudes, just kind of like a environment that wasn't really conducive to thinking deeply about a practice or anything. I was just kind of screwing around, and a lot of partying, drinking and drugs and stuff going on at that time. It was just kind of, I had this like studio set up out in the garage, I remember, and it was like, yeah, I was making art out there, but it was also just like people were out there hanging out and getting messed up and stuff. It wasn't serious business, and so, and the stuff I was making was terrible. Like, I enjoyed doing it, but like, if I were to see any of that now, it's like clearly just the scrawlings of like a young drunk person, so just stupid shit basically. But I started really taking it seriously, I think, would have been around the end of 2016, maybe beginning of 2017. I had quit drinking a few years before, because I had developed a pretty bad reliance and problem with alcohol, unfortunately, which kind of just took me out of art completely. Like, I just didn't even do anything for years. And I got sober, thankfully, like that was all good. And I knew that I wanted to get back into it. Like, I needed something to make my life feel meaningful,
Yeah.
And I knew in the back of my mind that was probably going to be art. And I had done other things in the past. It used to be music. Like, that was my huge thing growing up. But by the time like the post sobriety rolled around and everything, like, I was pretty much alone. Like, the idea of starting a band with people or something just seemed out of the question. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to art. That's a solo practice that I can sort of just really dive into and focus on to sort of keep myself on track and make it feel like there's a point to me being alive,
Yeah.
And so it's in something it changed then too. I knew that I wanted to like really make a good effort at it. And so even after sobriety, it took maybe 2 years of just kind of doing nothing and like feeling shitty. And but thankfully I eventually got back to like picking up a brush. But I remember thinking a lot about what I even wanted to portray in paintings. Because I felt like it would be silly to just kind of keep making, following my whims with painting and just making things that didn't have any consistency or anything.
Right.
I thought it would be a good idea to sort of like set some aesthetic parameters for myself to work within. And so that's what I did. And I thought of things that I liked seeing in other paintings. I started looking more into older art history, something that I had like stupidly ignored as a young person, and I thought long and hard about what I was attracted to and all those things. And I'm kind of rambling now, but you get the idea.
No, this is a good story. So if you don't mind, so what year did you get sober, and then what year, because you said there was about 2-year delay before you started taking it seriously, and like it seemed like you have a very disciplined approach.
Yeah, I kind of had to, and I think that was born out of disciplining myself with getting off the booze. And I quit. When I actually quit drinking was about 10 years ago. It was like October of 2023 or 2013, and
still quitting in your 20s though. A lot of people, it's 35. It's like our age when they're quitting or whatever.
Totally, yeah. And I went to rehab to do that. I'm not ashamed of that. And there was the people in there, like you said, are people in their 70s, trying to kick the thing. So I'm very grateful that I was able to escape that lifestyle, because it was, I mean, everyone knows how it goes. It'll ruin your life if you let it.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like having an artistic practice is at least partially responsible for me being able to stay out of all of that. But to answer your question, so I quit in 2013, and then I think I started painting again near the end of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a couple paintings, and it took me a really long time because I was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing, and for a year or two, I made stuff that sucked. It looked really bad. It was funny because I just moved a few months ago, and I found those first 2 or 3 paintings that I had made when I restarted painting, and it was nice and kind of bittersweet to see them, but I ended up just putting them at the curb because I was just like, I think maybe a couple people would have been like, why the hell did you do that? But I think that it's been important for me to not be too precious about the past and dwelling on the past and moving forward and all of that. So, but I remember after I had made 3 or 4 paintings, there was one piece, in about 2017. I remember it was right at the beginning of 2017 where I was like, okay, I think I'm finally onto something here. I can keep honing this and maybe it'll lead somewhere. And if you find earlier in your practice, like I said, a sort of like set of parameters that you can work within and sort of keep hammering on the same things, the same motifs visually, I think naturally your own style, your own network of meaning with the things that you choose to keep portraying will naturally rise out of that. You really do just have to keep doing it. And
it's a good point.
Yeah, I think 2018 So about 5 years ago was when I really started to feel like this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And that's about when that planetary clairvoyance job came through. And in some ways, I feel like that was kind of like the first meaningfully larger, impactful piece that I had done that I was like actually satisfied with. And, I can still look at that today, and there's 1,000 little things I would have done differently. Of course, parts where I'm like, ugh, why do I, but it's still like, it pretty much holds up to me. And like, for that to have been 5 years ago now, which is crazy, that to me says that I'm at least on some sort of right track.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, that thing turned a lot of heads. It's
I was really grateful for that job. Yeah.
Well, so I want to highlight one of the points you made. Do you know who Steve Zapata is, or Zapata?
No, I don't think so.
So he's pretty well accomplished. I don't know all his credits, but he has a YouTube channel. He just did a Q&A the other day, and he's very professional artist. A lot of people look up to him. Style-wise, he touches on surrealism combined with form. I think it'd be up your alley, frankly, like even his execution. But he was talking about how the move that made him kind of go from being an intermediate. So he's very self-aware. He was like, okay, about 10 years ago, I knew that I didn't suck, but I was a little unfocused in what my work should be known as. So like following those parameters.
You kind of have to choose,
Yeah, you have to make choices on and he was like, okay, so if you take the fundamentals, he's like, I value form over color. It's not that color isn't important, but he's like, drawing forms, having strong lighting and all that stuff to really accentuate that. That's the thing that he's like, I value that more. So by writing out what he believes is good art for him, helped him then develop and be more focused. And a little about me, I feel like I'm finally kind of getting to that point too, because I feel the last couple of years I've been very much like a self-taught art student, kind of bouncing around. I'm right now, I'm like, okay, obviously I need to develop a lot, but I'm deciding what I want to create and be known as more intentionally now. So it's interesting hearing that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that echoed, because I think that, intention, I guess, being the key word there. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself, but given that, when you're making a piece of art, you can often be sort of almost feel like shackled by the infinite wealth of choices you can make in a piece of art. And so and in a wider sense, like your practice in general. So it's, to me anyway, and I guess to a lot of other people, it's helpful to kind of zero in on at least a loose area of, we only have so much time, to make art. So you do have to think about those things. Like you were just saying, what do I want to be putting out there? And like this Steve guy too, like I did the same thing. Like I remember writing down, just kind of free associating words, phrases, mental images, and selecting things that, you really feel inside, things that resonate with you. So
that's really cool. Now, what do you think about, you got to have all that kind of stumbling, all of that learning, maybe even going really wide and then eventually coming in. So do you think, like Steve was saying, it makes sense to make that more stylistic defined decision when you're intermediate already and you're trying to get to that next level? Or do you think a beginner, maybe 1 year's experience, should already start making those decisions?
I think it's something to think about when you're starting. It's something to always think about. I think you always need to be reflecting on your practice and what it means, and whether if you're feeling stagnant or not. I sometimes feel like I'm painting the same thing over and over. But then I also think, like, maybe that's not so bad, and that maybe there is some sort of essence that every artist is sort of struggling to attain, or I guess in the repetition of painting similar things, it's like you're trying to get closer and closer to the core of what you're trying to express. And so I think it's good when you're starting to maybe have a loose roadmap of where you want to be taking things. But and I still fall into this trap all the time. Like, it's good to think about those things like we've been saying, but you also, if you get too concerned with the things that you're supposed to be doing or the things that you planned on, you end up maybe canceling out other potentially fruitful avenues for your art.
Right.
So you don't want to be too strict about it, but I guess the good thing about sitting and making art is that you have plenty of time to think about what you're doing.
Stare at it endlessly.
Fucking hours in the chair, you will be thinking, or you should be. So yeah, it's always a weird dance between those two poles, I think, because I'm always trying to sort of analyze my work, but then there's also a strong part of me that is intentionally trying to step aside and let the work be what it wants to be,
Right. Yeah, there's always those points when you're creating art that there's the moments where everything feels hyper deliberate, every stroke is calculated, and then there's that moment where it's like a blink of an eye, and all of a sudden you've lost yourself completely in it.
Yeah.
And you look away an hour later and you're like, oh, it's coming together.
Yeah. And that's kind of like what I'm after. When I feel like time has disappeared or something, that's usually when I'm doing my strongest painting.
Yep.
And so it's like thinking about things is good in the sense that you can set yourself up to maybe go down a path. But for me, I find that the more you can sort of take yourself out of the equation, or this part of you anyway, the better off you're going to be anyway, or maybe you'll be closer to some sort of truth that you're trying to get at.
Yeah. Talking about style a little bit, and then you're saying how deliberate you are with what you want to achieve and what you aren't. I guess two questions: how would you describe your style? And then with that, how would you say, what are the things that you value or that you're thinking about with each piece? And you could use abstract words, you could use foundational things. I'm just curious, like, kind of what's in your head to a certain degree.
Yeah. Describing my style, I feel like might have been easier a couple years ago. I used to, because people at work will like ask you what you do, and it's like, I don't know. What you're gonna think I'm weird?
Slightly beautiful, slightly grotesque. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a huge thing. I used to tell people weird things happening in the forest. Because that was like what I started as. And I feel like it's definitely still a through line in my work, but I was drawn to like really lush forested environments with like a lot of crumbling ruins and stuff. I mean, this is still shit that's in pretty much every painting that I do, but it's kind of more of a focus in the beginning. But now, I don't really know what to tell people how to describe my style. I should probably have some sort of like textbook answer for that, but
well, it's fine if you don't. I mean, what if I said how I interpret your style and you'd be like, hard disagree, or you agree?
That I can do. Yeah.
Is that fair? Okay. So I'd say what I think is interesting is I look at your work and I'm like, he obviously studies enough of reality to know what form light and shadow values are, right? But there's a huge amount of imagination too. So I would say overall, you're a surrealist of sorts.
Sure.
Your color choices are very interesting. You definitely like complementary colors, but you also really like this kind of I hate the fucking term, but like you do have like some like brighter kind of pastel-y colors, but then they're contrasted with some very interesting interconnected forms.
Sure.
So those are the things that I see that really resonate with me, because I draw from a lot of that kind of stuff in my own way too. You know?
Yeah, and I guess that was the second part of your question there that I sort of neglected to answer, but that's
that's fine.
Like, yes, those things are important to me, and what you're seeing is kind of what I'm after. I think light and color are kind of everything for me. And also, one of the major touchstones too, now that I'm thinking about it, about everything that I do, is I'm always I don't consider myself a landscape painter, especially because I'm not really painting in a realistic style. I'm not really chasing realism or anything, but figuring out how to depict a space is super important for me. Environment is super important to me, and not just a cool space, but how does that space feel? What does it make you feel? Do you feel like you're able to enter it? If someone tells me that they feel like they want to walk into one of my paintings, that's one of the most gratifying things for me to hear, because that is kind of what I'm after. And I don't necessarily mean it in like a purely escapist sense, but I do think that if I'm doing a good job at what I'm attempting, then I want to kind of be able to take people somewhere else for a second, I guess. But the light and color, and of course form is important too, but that's something that I really kind of don't control. A lot of the forms, the big rock faces and stuff, sort of just evolved from simple mark making. When I'm starting the painting, I'll start with sort of a medium dark ground, not always, but you just start to work up from that medium. You can throw in some shadows. It all starts super abstractly, and I just kind of look at it and see what is starting to take shape, and just try to follow it, really. So yeah.
So do you do sketches ahead of time?
No.
Just to kind of
no. There's a part of me that's sort of embarrassed about that. Like, I feel like a fake. I'm always like, if only people knew that I don't actually know what the hell I'm doing.
Well, the better you get, the more sometimes I feel like people see that, because it's funny, man. Because like I do these interviews all the time, right? And not to go on a giant tangent, but I feel like sometimes the people who I think are the most technically gifted have the most like insecurities about things. I'm not pointing at anybody in particular, but like it's just it's interesting how no matter how good you get, you're always falling short of what you think you can do.
It never changes. I have thankfully made things that like I can feel proud of. It's certainly not every piece. I am definitely not one of those people who is like in love with their own stuff. But there are a couple that I feel proud to show, and there are also plenty that like I'm not embarrassed by, and so that's a good thing. I mean, that being said, like there's plenty that I am embarrassed by, but like, yeah, those are steps you have to take to keep evolving. And I think that, having that insecurity as an artist and that uncertainty and the doubt, I guess I still don't know what all that means, but I think maybe part of it has to do with having a firmly established sense of taste and something that you're, what you like, what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you can't always get there. Maybe like once a year you'll strike on something that feels like what you were after, but so often it's just about sitting down and doing the thing anyway, and
loving the process.
I mean you have to, because if you if you don't, you're screwed. You're not going to be making art that feels like it has a soul. So I mean, I love the process, like you said, but you know how it goes with art making. It's like you can have one session where you feel amazing and like, you can see through to the end of the painting. You're like, I know how the next 50 hours of this are going to go. I'm dialed in now.
Yep.
And then the next night you're like, holy shit, what is this? What am I doing? And I think if you really care about what you're doing, I don't know if that feeling ever really goes away, because I hear it from so many other people. And I think that's core to the act of creation, I guess, is that roller coaster. And I guess to finish that thought, I think maybe if you are making things and like you feel really good about them all the time and like you feel like you're the shit, like you may want to step back and examine that, because like, it's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. Like you should always be reflecting on what you're doing and like whether it's where you want to be. So
it's an interesting balance too, because I mean, at least I think I value confidence as well. Like being confident that your art has worth is obviously important, but then I think it's also important to know, kind of where your place is and kind of how you're stacking up. Like, maybe it's just for me. I'm not like a dick about it, but I came from my family's very into sports. So competition was ingrained in me as a kid.
Sure.
So some of that stuff I still think about all the time. And the thing is, it pushes me, and I keep it internally. I don't, spout it out for everybody. But I think that stuff also is important too.
Yeah. I could go off on that subject in terms of discipline and so on, but I think we'll probably get there eventually. So
let's talk about it, man.
Yeah,
I feel like you I don't know, there's something about kind of how you think. I can relate to it a lot. But yeah, tell me a little bit about, your habits, discipline, things like that.
Yeah, I guess to sort of piggyback on what we were just talking about, I think that's another line that I'm always kind of struggling with is taking art or making art takes time, so much time, especially if you're working in traditional media. So if you hope to accomplish meaningful things for yourself, you got to be prepared to realize that that'll take months of commitment, probably. If you have a day job and so on, and life obligations, a family and so on, like you have to be able to be in it for the long term, and so then that leads you to discipline and like how many, what is a worthwhile paint session, during the week after you get home from work? Is it 2 hours? Is it 3 hours? Do you feel like painting that day? No. Should you do it anyway because like you only have so many hours in the week? Like, yeah, you should probably do it. Well, now it's the weekend. Like you have a couple free days. Like, do you want to go out and do shit, or do you want to sit in the chair and paint all weekend? And so like you have to make those decisions, and there is, it sounds dramatic to say, but there is an element of sacrifice in artistic practice.
Definitely.
And it doesn't have to be this big, you don't have to live like a monk, but like not all the time. Maybe if you have a deadline or something, but like for myself, like, I do stay pretty disciplined for a number of reasons, just because like it's good for my brain to be doing it, and I love doing it. Like I'm in my happy place when it's nighttime and I've got some music on and I know that I have 3, 4, 5, 6 hours to paint and just not really have to worry about much else. So I kind of set my life up to to allow for that space. Obviously, life gets in the way all the time, and your emotions and your motivation will try to stop you all the time, but you have to just kind of try to push past all that. Now, all that being said, there's a point past which I think that hyper discipline can sort of be self-defeating. And like, and I need to get better at this because a lot of times I'm kind of a psycho about like making myself sit down even when I don't want to. But you know, rest is important. Going out, and again, I don't do this nearly enough, so I shouldn't even be talking. But going out into the world and seeing things, and you know, connecting with human beings is important too. And you know, those things filter back into your art. But yeah, I like what you were saying about the whole like sports and competition thing, and how like having certain impulses sort of driven into your head. I get that. And like there was a point a couple years ago where I do feel like I was kind of going about the discipline in like in borderline unhealthy way. Right. Where like I was producing a ton of work and I was happy about that, but like, yeah, holy shit. Like that's like all I did was go to work, come home, like eat something that sucked in front of the computer and like immediately start painting until bedtime. And, you know, like, I guess I was a little younger then too. I don't really know how much a difference that makes, but like it's, you can be driven like in kind of a bad way. So it's like, I'm trying to find that happy medium, and I feel pretty okay about it lately. But yeah, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, definitely. I think so much of it is it's a compulsion, you know, like you strike me as a type person. Once again, I'm kind of, I don't know. They're just, I could sense some of the ways you think, but like, even when you're not painting, when I'm just walking around, when I'm honestly probably sometimes even at work, you know, I'm thinking about the piece I'm working on and I have it in my head. I'm visualizing it and I'm solving the problems that I'm going to then fix when I get that time. Yeah. So I kind of always thinking about it.
Yeah, you're never off.
Yeah. So it is kind of a blessing and a curse because it's an intense focus that some people don't have.
Yeah. The compulsion. Yeah. That's the word. Couldn't even really tell anyone why I feel that way, but I do, you know, and I think that, you know, I think I talk to a lot of people, just life in general, who don't, you know, they feel like they're missing that thing, that one thing, that hobby, that practice, their passion, whatever, that drives them through life. And people will say like, I wish I had that thing. I don't know how to find it. And I feel like I do. And I don't mean that in the way that like, oh, I'm the shit, I'm the big cool artist guy. It's like I know that like I feel like it's what I am supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I have to try to honor that, I guess, you know, because not everyone gets to have that. And so I feel grateful, you know. I feel a responsibility almost to be doing it while I'm alive. So
but I will say the cost of it is the very fleeting moments of complete satisfaction.
Yeah.
There's only a few moments, but they feel really good.
A couple times a year, you know, but like, it's funny though, because when, you know, obviously that's a funny thing, but it's true. And, but my God, you know, few things feel as nice as making something that you can really feel good about, and passing that to other people too, and knowing that, you know, it's not just about like, oh, I really want people to like my stuff, but it's about that deeper connection, you know, pouring yourself into something for 200 hours, you know, and it takes you months. And, you know, I think you're sending a message out, I guess, when you're making a piece of art. And when it's great when you alone can feel satisfied with it, and it is all the better when other people receive that message and it means something to them too. And that's, I guess, kind of what I mean by like responsibility to art, is that all of this, not to get too grandiose, but it's all a constant chain, like a feedback loop that you sort of pluck things from and feed back into the great chain of the artistic impulse, I guess. I think of all the things that inspired me as a young person, things that made me feel a certain way. And if I have that compulsion in me, then I feel like you have to keep giving it back out too.
Yeah. If I can change topic just slightly. Yeah. So when you were starting to take art really seriously, the 2 years after sobriety and stuff, what was your method of improving? Not just putting in the hours, because you and I both know that there's a lot of people who probably think that it's just literally doing an hour a day and they'll get better, and they will, but they won't have those breakthroughs of just the shared knowledge of studying and learning from people who are better than you, So what was your method of kind of improving?
Yeah. I agree with what you just said. It's not always just about hours. I guess, because that so often is like what I tell people, is that it's mostly about hours or ass in the chair time, as some people say.
It definitely is. Like, there's no disagreement there, because you have to have that discipline.
Sure. But I think, kind of going back to what you were saying a minute ago about, letting your practice sort of inform your day-to-day life too. Times when you're not at the easel, think about art. Think about what you're looking at in front of you in reality, even if you're at work. Once you start to get that little creature in your brain that makes you think about light and color all the time.
Yep.
And I remember, it's funny that you're asking, because like I don't really think about those earlier times too often, but I am remembering for sure that that was something that was new for me, like analyzing my world and trying to, because I mean, color itself and light are infinite rabbit holes. I still feel like I know nothing about them, but when you're truly starting out, and you can look at a potted plant or something and be like, okay, well, the plant is green, but nothing is just that, nothing is just one thing. And so you just start to analyze everything, and you get that bug in your mind, and you start to, like I said, feedback loops. Your art, the act of sitting in that chair for all those hours, maybe starts to take your mind on a different path, and you start to see reality a little bit different. And I don't mean that in like a big, cool, mystical way. It's just you're thinking about different things. You're paying attention to different things. And obviously that feeds back into your art. And I remember looking at nature all the time earlier on, starting, and just trying to really understand like what's going on when I'm looking at a tree, or like, the tree over there has some fog in front of it. Well, what is fog? How would I paint some mist? And it's like, well, that's water particles that are evaporating, and light is hitting them, and it's casting color over this. So it's truly endless. And so I think that's probably what I would say is like what helped me early on, aside from the just like, caveman, like brute force, just like smashing your head against the wall thing, which like that even to this day is still like a large part of my practice. Like there are so many nights where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but like I can't get up. Like I have to just, and sometimes, many times, I end a session feeling like I ruined the painting, or like it's not popping, but that's where like the dumber side of all this comes on, where it's like, well, just fucking sit down again tomorrow and like you'll work it out. You always do one way or another. You might not make a masterpiece, but if you can finish the damn thing and feel okay about it, then like that's fine. Move on.
So one other thing I'm thinking is, you're obviously really humble, right? And I think that's awesome. So I'm not trying to put you in an uncomfortable position, but when I look at your art, I'm like, this guy's extremely advanced. Do you think that you're like a good painter who just has a lot of patience and knows when things are off and is dedicated to fixing those problems, versus being a advanced painter who gets it right the first time and is quicker, but it produces the same outcome? That's the thing, is because you can be like, you have to be good to create a good painting, but you and I both know that there are some people that literally can do what one person does in 20 hours in 5 hours because they don't make any mistakes.
Yeah, I am not that guy. I am absolutely the former. And I think that, I'm always talking to people about like how much time painting takes. I always say I feel time haunted because I'm always just thinking about hours and time and what I can do and when and how quickly and so on. But I'm not going to lie. Part of that is because I don't have that confidence of being able to make one mark and being like, that's it. Once in a while, it's maybe starting to improve as I keep getting better. And those things happen so gradually that like you're probably never going to notice them about yourself.
Well, yeah, when you're 50, I bet you're going to be real fast.
I would hope so, because I don't want to be spending so long on every piece. It's depends on the job too. If I'm working for, the Tomb Mold album, the recent one was a great example of that, where there was a tight deadline on that, but I was, it took me a lot of time because I was, it's like you said, it's like, what something is supposed to look like, how you want it to look like. And you can probably get it there because like, you're not a terrible painter, but like,
it's what's bad.
Yeah.
That's exactly. So much of like being a good artist, just knowing what's bad and not turning into mediocre work.
Exactly. And in having the willingness to fix that shit, even if it's like, well, I feel like this happened like 20 times with the Tomb Mold painting, where it's like I just spent like 5 hours painting this rock, and it sucks and I hate it. And so like, now I need to like suck it up and just fucking go back over it, But I do think that like having that tenacity, I guess, is what for me has like allowed me to make some of my more successful pieces. Is like, yeah, there are many times where I want to just like throw my hands up and be like, I'm just going to start something else. But like, I kind of make a point of like just always finishing stuff. Something one of my friends, this guy, Justin Bean, he's a guy who lives close to me. He does these really cool abstract paintings. I've known him forever, but I remember, and this was like back in my 20s, like before I had like really started to try to take painting seriously.
Yeah.
But I remember him impressing upon me the point that like, you should, like, if you don't like how something looks, like you can just work it until it looks good. Like that's kind of the whole thing, and like, it sounds so,
it's kind of a realization though, isn't it?
Yeah. And especially back then, when I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like cause like, I was just like, like I said, I was starting out and just pumping out this bullshit and like one painting in one night, and then I was like, oh, I can just keep trying to make it look good. And like, yeah, that was an important realization for sure. And it's still
kind of a misconception, right? It's like, we've all been around that somehow in life we've been exposed to that like theory of like, oh no, art is pure, art is your every stroke is perfect and it is what exactly it's meant to be, where it's like, no, it's actually like, no, that stroke sucks, do it like 5 more times.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There's a large aspect of my practice, I guess, that is very workmanlike. And I guess that kind of goes back to like the discipline thing too, where like, yeah, it's okay if not every painting session is like this big magical thing where you feel your cup overfloweth with inspiration and all of this. It's really not like that. It's like, oh, I'm tired and I feel shitty and I don't want to go to work tomorrow, but I'm going to spend 2 hours on this thing because you might have a little breakthrough then, that's like what those smaller sessions are about. And that's why it's important to just, it's like where the workman like mindset becomes important, is that through that you can facilitate those more meaningful, like mystical feeling moments in your practice, where like you might sit down for 2 hours and feel like, what's the point? It's not a very long time, but so many times I will have that one little aha moment that's like 2 minutes of painting, or like even one brushstroke, or like one color that I hadn't considered in the right spot can entirely change your painting and entirely change the way you feel about it too. And like that's such an important thing for me too, I guess, is going back to like thinking about your art while you're going through your life and at work and everything. It's like, I don't know about you, but when I have a piece that I'm like really hot on and thinking about all the time, and like
ruminating.
And if it's not going well, like I will be in a not great mood, like it affects your life. And like, I don't know, maybe that sounds kind of crazy, but it doesn't like turn me into a psycho. I'm not going to like snap at people at work because I had a bad painting session. But, conversely, when I am really in the swing of things with a painting, I'm like, hell yeah, let's do this. I feel more generally well.
I think for me, it's just if I have to leave a session and I know that there's something I have to fix and I haven't had the chance to fix it, it'll drive me insane.
Yep.
So like, I'm interrupted by something, and then it's like, you want to make sure you don't, forget to fix it. So like putting down written notes in random places.
Yeah. So I have like little psycho notes all over the place.
Yeah.
In exactly that scenario when it's like, well, shit, I have to go to bed now. I have to. And it's like, I'm going to write down this like chicken scratch sentence that like will hopefully guide me back to where I was last night, and, but that's it. It's what you got to do, I guess,
Yeah. So what type of work do you do for your day job, just generally?
Oh yeah, sure. Right now I work at a wallpaper studio, which is kind of a strange job. I'm pretty grateful for it though, because it's not very public facing. I did like grocery store retail stuff for like 18 years. And like that shit just like made me a crazy person. Like it was not good. And I don't know, but I think this is a common, obviously the idea of hating your job is not at all unique, but that can transform you as a person too, and in a very negative sense. So that's kind of another conversation, but I'm glad to be not doing that every day anymore. My day job now, it's like, yeah, it's definitely like just a job still, but it's a bit more adjacent to the arts. It's less, I'm not having to have my mind poisoned by the general public every day, like, I'm just in like a warehouse, basically like printing and packing and shipping things. So it's I'm grateful for it because like, it kind of pays the bills. I have to supplement that with art, obviously, but it affords me a greater degree of mental space than my past things have. So, that makes for better art time too. If I'm not having to come home feeling like I want to like smash my head through a window.
Or just completely mentally exhausted.
Yeah.
Because you have to preserve a certain amount for yourself.
Yeah. So many, like, my former jobs, like early morning, super physical shifts, and then coming home at like 2 p.m. and it's like, I have to paint, but it's like, I'm fucking about to pass out on the floor, and so like, I don't really have that. I mean, we all get tired after a day of work, of course, but it's easier to deal with now. So yeah, that's been good. It's been good for me.
Nice. I mean, ideally, are you, aspiring or working towards going full time, or do you like the balance of being able to do stuff that's, very personal, fulfilling art wise, and having the job?
Yeah. That's kind of the like. It's like an eternal thing for artists, isn't it? Like,
it is. Because I'm not sure I'd be any happier being full time.
I don't know either. And I'd like to think that I would, because why wouldn't you want to get paid every day to do the thing that you love? That'd be great, right? But and there's a large part of me that does actually think that, like, not sarcastically, but like, I am afraid also of the idea that that would ruin the practice for me, especially having to do things, say I was to do it full time, that would likely mean that like I'm almost exclusively doing work for other people. And like, that's great. I love doing commissions most of the time. Making people happy through my work, like doing a successful commission, like that feels really good. Like, it's so gratifying. And I've worked with so many kind people in that, but the idea of having to nonstop produce images, like, to survive, I don't know if that'd be good. If I were given the opportunity, I think I would probably try it. If I knew that, if it was like safe and that I could reasonably do it, then of course I would try it. But yeah, there's a not insignificant degree of trepidation in considering that. And so if anything, it's like having to go to a job, even if it's a like fairly cool job, like the one I now have, like, it's still the thing that you have to do every day. You have to do it. And no matter what it is, no matter how cool it is, like, you're probably going to kind of get sick of it eventually. And I guess if I am going to get sick of the thing that I have to do every day, I would kind of rather have that be something that isn't my passion, Yeah,
you can push it onto that.
Yeah, because if painting was ruined for me, like, I don't know what I'd do, It probably wouldn't be good. I'd have to find something else. And
I doubt it would be ruined for you, but what I think happens is when it's not going well, that's your identity. Whereas if it's not going well, but you have more things, then the highs and the lows they're more middle instead of drastic, and that's the swing that can I think they can get people to go full time.
Yeah, it is a grueling lifestyle, and I think people have that impression of like, oh, you get to like hang out in your studio and like just express yourself all day, and it's like, no, dude, it's work. It's work. It's hard. Like, I get that it's not like hard physical labor, but trust me, it's work. Yeah,
Yeah.
So I at least am grateful to the job for, like, even if I don't love the job as such, it's like after a day of work, it reminds me that, like, oh boy, that shit sucked. It's time to go home and paint now. Like, I'm excited to do that now because you have light and dark. You need those opposites to balance things out. Yeah. So I don't know, but maybe someday if I start getting flooded with like high-end commissions, like, maybe I would take a chance at it, but
I mean, you're definitely on the path, man. I mean,
we'll see.
your paintings speak for themselves.
Yeah, my main concern really is just trying to make good work and seeing what happens, I guess.
100%. What's I'm thinking more from a technical perspective. What's one facet of your art or painting that you want to improve on? So it could be a foundation, it could be whatever, you know.
There are a lot of things. I feel like, it's a big question. It's a good one though. I think something I'm always trying to get better with is restraint. And I think that's kind of what we were talking about a bit ago about having confidence in your work and confidence as a painter. I'm always wondering and looking at art that is like deceptively simplistic. It could be like simple brushwork or like simple fields of color that are like unembellished. Think of Michael Whalen.
Oh yeah,
fantasy artist. Yeah, I mean
he has a lot of like flat kind of gradient stuff that doesn't. Yeah. It's not really highly rendered. There's pockets of very good rendered stuff.
Yeah, he can paint his ass off. He's like the best fantasy illustrator of the last. Well, it's debatable, of course, I guess, but everyone.
Him or Frazetta, that's a debate.
Of course. Yeah, look at his stuff. Frazetta's a perfect example where it is. It's so masterful, and
the unfinished part portrays confidence. That's the thing.
Exactly. It's the things you can knowingly kind of leave out or like fudge because it's like, well, you get what I'm doing there, and I don't have to prove myself that I can like paint a twisty tree trunk with moss on it. Like, here's 2 brush strokes, you get it, and looking at Michael Whalen's work too, like you were saying, like those big flat skies that he's kind of known for, you'll see him do these huge, dramatic, like apocalyptic skies that are like full of complementary blues and oranges, and it's like eye-poppingly good. But then he has an equal amount of pieces where the sky is blue. That's it.
Well, he's got to let that, for the novels, he's got to let the text, and all that. So he's smart about that.
Yeah, and there is an intelligence there and design, of course. That's an element for sure. But and I'm not like trying to ape anyone's style or anything. But it's like once you really start to look at what people are doing and using areas of hyper detail or like hyper technical skill. Employing those in a way that feels confident and knowing rather than just like, with my own work, like that's like one of the things with planetary clairvoyance, where I look at that now and I'm like, yeah, it's still pretty cool. There's like cool slimy monsters and shit, but it is like, it's kind of packed with shit. And like, if you step back from it a little bit, like you can't necessarily discern what's going on. And like sometimes that's cool. Like I do like a lot of maximalist, naughty looking, tripped out stuff where you can't necessarily tell what one thing is or is not.
Yeah.
But it's also good, I think, to consider the bigger picture and how these elements affect each other, how you can use negative space to enhance the things that you really want people to actually be focusing on. So that's one thing I'm after is some more restraint. Another thing I would like to maybe get into is doing more with like characters. And I don't really have any desire to like just do explicitly like character art, like with no background or anything. Like I still want to, environments I feel like are always kind of going.
You're kind of talking about somewhat like concept looking art stuff.
Yeah, I guess I just mean like having figures in my paintings that are like not this big and
they're
like
distinct.
Yeah, and like maybe have some like identifiable characteristics or like a cool outfit or something. Like I'm Yoshitaka Amano, I'm
Huge
sure.
fan.
Yeah, of
Huge
course.
fan.
But like I mean, I grew up with his shit, you know, from like playing Final Fantasy and everything. Those were like some of my more formative inspirations. And like, it's funny to come back around to that later in life where Amano's work feels every bit as vital and alive and graceful as it did when you were a kid. But it's like now I can look at it and be like, what's he doing? You know, and that's getting back to what I was saying about characters. It's like he's a master of that, right? Like all of that stuff is so inspirational and
restraint too. He's a great example of negative space and
absolutely
pockets.
Simple lines, big sweeping lines too, where you can tell that he's just and knowing that that's enough, knowing that that's gonna make sense to the viewer, you know. But yeah, in terms of like, you know, his costuming and everything, like I have not really tried to do any of that. So it's just it's something that's been on my mind. And before I was doing the latest two mold piece, I was working on this big thing for Arch Enemy Gallery, actually, that does have a few, you know, like characters in it with like clothes on that are like the size of the whole painting. And so I'm looking to get back to that. It's exceedingly rare for me to like table a painting and just put it in the closet, but I had to do it with that one because it was so big. So I'm hoping to get back to that. I think I got to do some.
Is it because deadlines popped up? Is that why?
Yeah, well, frankly, I needed money, and like, you know, the two mold thing popped up, and you know that the big thing I was working on was technically just like a personal thing. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do the two mold album, you know. So that's what I did, and then you know, life things happen, and you need money. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is just trying to work with some people on some commissions to sort of get back on an even keel financially to a point where I feel like okay about working on something more personal, you know? So kind of a big roundabout answer there, but yeah, restraint, thinking more deeply about like my characters, my subjects, and maybe more preparation too is the final thing I would say for things that I want to get better at, because
get yourself a sketchbook.
Man, yeah, I do have one. It's down here. I scribble some really awful shit in it sometimes. Like I can't draw, dude. I don't have chops. Like and I am not just being humble on that. Like it's something.
How can you not draw? What are you talking about?
I can't. It's like I can make little. I don't want to say that I never do sketches in preparation because it's like sometimes I do, mainly when I'm working for a client. You know, but I do, like when I have a commission, like I do tell people, like, before you give me any money, I want to be really clear about what you're going to get from me, what you can expect. And one of those things is like, you know, I'm going to be honest, I don't do a ton of preliminary work. I can make some really crappy looking sketches that'll like maybe give you an idea of like where large objects are in the painting, but like it's not going to look cool, you know. It's like it's basically just like code for my brain to like understand roughly what I need to do with the paint. But I feel infinitely more comfortable using a brush to render things than a pencil. And being self-taught, I feel like there are some basic fundamentals like that I just kind of like skipped over. And in some ways, like I'm kind of proud of that, because I've like made it work for myself, you know, but
I'm self-taught as well. I know the feeling.
Sure. Yeah, but so you know, like there are certain times when you're like trying to do something really basic, like draw a concept sketch, and I'm just like agonizing over this concept sketch, and then I get frustrated, and it's like, well, I'm just gonna start painting anyway because it's gonna change anyway. So, and that's, I guess, just in the wider sense of like how I work. Like I feel like the more I'm focusing on what my preconceived idea of the painting is supposed to be, like the worst time I'm going to have trying to hammer the square peg into the round hole, you know?
Yeah.
So largely it's a positive thing for me, but there's a part of me that's feeling like, I can't just wing it all the time. Or maybe I could make better, more impactful things if I work a little bit more on like the front end, So it's something I want to experiment with. It's just I kind of haven't really. I want to like just sit on the couch for 2 weeks and like just draw, to try to like get some of that back. But with the amount of time I have, and like trying to get shit done, it's just.
I mean, I think not that you came on this trying to get my advice by any means, but
I'll take any advice.
All right. Well, being really strong at drawing skills will help reduce errors down the road. Like I've found that just from my practice, because like I'm not saying shift to doing what I do, because mine takes some of the fun out of it, but yeah. I'm doing stuff in watercolor and pen and ink, and if I don't map out everything in terms of this is where the values are going to be here, this is the part that's going to be more unfinished, this is the part that's going to be finished, I'll overwork everything.
Yeah.
So I have to like do studies and sketches and for instance, like I'll just show you real quick. So doing this drawing, and I think this, all right, so I'm doing a collaborative drawing with a couple other artists, and this is like my preliminary.
Okay.
And then this is my final.
Okay.
So basically I was like trying to figure out, because the challenging thing with this one is getting it so the branches have depth to them and they're not just flat. And it's kind of hard to like really tell from here, but I have like some white out and shit. Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool, by the way. It looks good. But like I have to be very meticulous about that, because kind of like what you're saying, like I know what's good and what's not, but I don't always get it right the first try. So I do multiple drafts, and I'm very, even if I'm trying to make it look spontaneous, I can guarantee you it's not. Right. Yeah, man, overworking, I agree with you. I think having some of those, a little more planning would probably be good, because there was a album cover I was just doing, that has not been announced yet, but I found myself in a similar position. Some paintings go pretty smooth, and then others you just kind of get trapped on. And this is one that thankfully like turned out pretty okay in the end. Like I'm fine with it. It looks good, but I felt like there were so many points where like, when you just work something into oblivion, like, and it sucks, and you're like, if I just like thought about that, and I wouldn't have. For me, it's when I can see it and it's kind of cakey looking, because it has layers on top of layers. Or like it's like with this one, I have like some gouache touch-ups that just piss me off. It's like I couldn't have just not, done the pen there. Yeah, I. It's funny that you say that, because like for whatever reason, I'm like a very, very flat painter. I paint really thin. Okay. There's almost like no texture to my paintings. It's not like something I decided to do. It's just how I do things. But I know what you mean, because like there will be sections where I've had to just like paint over and over. Or it'll be like someone's face or something that's like the size of a thumbnail, and it's like. And that's the part you don't want to do over and over, dude, man. Yeah, you want to get it right the first time. Yeah, and like I'll go to varnish it, and like I'll like lean down, and you can like see that there's like this little mound of paint there, and it's like, but yeah, that's part of it, I guess. I hope to just keep improving. That's all I can say. So yeah. So do you collect like art books at all, or where do you kind of seek your inspiration? Not really. That's it's a costly habit, man. I wouldn't advise it. I've spent so much money on this shit. Yeah, there's a few that I have for sure, but I'm a little embarrassed to say that like I don't spend a ton of time looking at art. Yes and no, though, because like it's in like most of my like social media things. Oh, it's everywhere, yeah. Yeah, I'm mostly following artists or like pages that post classical art. So it's kind of always in front of me, and I think I'm just like not really thinking about it
but in terms of like sitting down intentionally, spending an hour looking at a book or something, like I really need to do more of that. I do it once in a while, and this kind of goes with the last question as well. Like things that I want to get better at is just sort of cultivating a deeper sense of being able to like stretch my legs a little bit and like study things more, look deeper at artists that I really love, that I've loved for my whole life, doodle, stop trying to think about making a completed piece, experiment. I simply, I don't do it enough. But I do it once in a while. I do have, for a while I was finding a bunch of these Gustave Doré books at one of the local used bookshops.
Well, those are cheap.
Oh my God. Yeah. They're like $8.
Yeah.
So like that's, whenever I'm at a used bookstore, I'm definitely going to go through the art section just to see if there's anything I want to grab. So, I guess I'm being a little misleading because like I definitely have a good selection of like cool art books, but like
you don't look at them all the time. Yeah,
exactly. Not in a meaningful way, and I should do more of that. But those Doré books, I don't think of him necessarily as being like a super direct influence on me, but like he is for sure, I would say. And I got years ago one of those. It was a book full of his biblical illustrations.
Yeah,
and my God, those are just amazing. I don't know. To think of the amount of work that guy produced in his life it's mind-boggling. I have the Don Quixote collection too from him, and like I don't know, man. No one did it like quite like him, I guess.
Do you find that a lot of your influences from classical, like illustration and painting?
Yeah, it would be dishonest of me to say that like, to like pretend that it's all like, classic canon stuff that I'm inspired by. Like there is a ton of that for sure. But I came to it later in life, appreciating older art came as an extension of like trying to become a better painter and like
realize how hard that shit is.
Yeah. And, being in my mid 20s and like realizing that, I didn't go to school or anything. So realizing that I didn't really know shit about art. And a thing that was big for me too was realizing that all of those old artworks were made by people like you and me, and that like there's just as much spirit and drama and emotion and everything that, all of those human things are still very much embedded in those old works. Just, people never change, so things might look or feel old or stuffy or whatever, but if you dig into it a little bit, you find that it's just this endless, lineage of human experience. And
absolutely.
And that also like having that understanding of things too, like allows you to see it in such a way that like doesn't feel old anymore. It feels new and alive now. And there's at the museum in Detroit, there's a couple paintings in the like they have like an older like American classics section. I mean, they've got all sorts of shit in there. Obviously, there's a really all sorts of cool stuff. But the thing I'm getting at is that there was this painting in there by Thomas Cole, and another one by Church called Cotopaxi. That's a real famous painting of like a volcano erupting. You'd know it if you saw it. It's got this big dramatic sunset and everything. But
okay,
seeing those in person, like as I was kind of learning how to paint again, it's like just mind-boggling. You know, it's an emotional experience to stand in front of those, because you realize that, you know, it sounds a little corny, I guess, but it's just like this is a transmission from the past made by a person, you know, and it's still just as,
and it's living, you know.
yeah, exactly,
That's the
it's
thing
just as alive as it ever was. And see, I find that a lot in older art. I over the years got really into some of the pre-Raphaelite artists, symbolist painters, Francis Danby, Jean Delville, Thomas Cole, like I mentioned, Leonora Carrington, and Max Ernst.
Max Ernst, yeah.
That, yeah, really. There's a painting on my wall, just like a fold out from a Max Ernst art book, that kind of like loosely inspired the artwork for the Enduring Spirit. And Max Ernst is kind of became a really big inspiration to me too, because he, I love all of his work, but it's this period where he's doing these, alien landscapes that are like real gnarled kind of. The thing I love about them is that
kind of like corally kind of texture on a lot of stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and it's like I found like a parallel in my mind between our work, is that like I don't, you're looking at a landscape or a scene that's like comprised of this matter, and you don't really know if it's inert or if it's alive or in some in between state, or if it's personified. There's like, if you look closely at that shit, there's like a million like ghoulish little faces like peeking out at you, and that's something I'm really attracted to, and something I find just kind of like happens naturally when I'm painting and not thinking much about it, just strange forms that like could be rocks, could be other things. Who knows?
Yeah.
But a couple other people, there's a Romanian painter named Sabin Balasa, who I just have to shout out. He is dead, but like,
pour it out for him. Huh?
Yeah, he's one that I just feel like more people should know, because I never really see anyone talking about his stuff. He describes his own work as cosmic romanticism. It's just this really beautiful mashup of things that seem like kind of, I don't want to say new age, because like it's not that, but like kind of some of that mixed with a lot of like pyramidal structures and like these distorted like feminine forms that are riding on these like big strange beasts that he keeps portraying, but they're really like soft and non-threatening looking, but still like just super mysterious and unique, and I love that artist, Sabin Balasa.
Sounds up my alley for sure.
You'd probably really like it. Gustave Moreau, huge one. And then like as far as more genre-oriented stuff, obviously the Yoshitaka Amano, a lot of video game, anime adjacent things. I don't know if you know Hiro Isono. He did the artwork for The Secret of Mana.
Oh yeah. I've seen that stuff.
Yeah, that's like, it's like the big giant tree with like a couple people standing in front of it. Just it's iconic stuff, And when I was first getting started and like thinking a lot about forests and everything, I'm thinking that was a huge inspiration. Like staring at those and trying to figure out like how one even does those things. I could go on and on about inspirations, but I'll stop there.
I guess do you have any of the more and I don't mean it in a condescending way, but like more common like influences, kind of like for this type of genre, right? So you mentioned Waylon, but like Seagrave, maybe even some of the 70s heavy metal stuff like Mobius, like Jouet and stuff like that. Like, has that kind of eked its way into?
Absolutely. Yeah. Seagrave is someone I should look at his work more, because sometimes I feel like I'm doing a lesser version of what he's doing. But it's funny because like I don't really consider him like a direct influence, but like I'll look at his stuff. I see him on Instagram or stuff. So he'll post like real nice close-ups of things that he's working on right now, and I'm like, kind of like the way he builds his structures. Like he'll do architecture, but it's made out of like a bunch of little writhing bodies and like strange alien-looking forms, and that's an approach I feel like maybe his process is similarly intuitive to some degree.
Yeah.
Obviously he's a far more accomplished professional. I mean, it's Dan Seagrave, but like, and I know that, you'll see his sketches and everything, like just masterful stuff from top to bottom. But that's a big one. Mobius, obviously, what else can I say about his catalog? Endlessly inspiring. I've got a couple of his books on the shelf over there, like some of those nicer, newer reissues that are like hardbound and like pristine.
Some of those are a little hard to get now. I just put a purchase in the other day, and I hope it's not from a scam web store. Put it that way. But
sometimes you'll get scammed. But Mobius Drie, who is it? Felipe Caza.
Oh yeah, love him too.
Yeah, all of that.
French artists, man, like they just had a super cool collective.
Yeah,
all of like that. A lot of the. Sorry, this isn't about me, but I've been really inspired by the early Games Workshop type of art. For like Warhammer. I never played Warhammer in my life, but
nor
Ian Miller and stuff like that.
Oh, dude, yeah, okay. I didn't know he was associated with them, but that guy. In terms of like crazy, like psychedelic freak out stuff, like that guy, fantastic work.
Absolutely.
I really enjoy his stuff. Yeah, I never got into the 40K or anything like that, but it produces a lot of cool art, that's for sure.
100%. Yeah. Well, let's pull up some work. If you want, though, let's take a quick 2 minutes, bathroom and water.
I got a piece, so that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I look at the time. It's about that time. And we're back. Let's go ahead and pull up some of your art here.
Let's do it.
So appreciate the high-res images. Definitely looks way better now. And if you, viewers and for you, Jesse, if you want to look at it better, I definitely recommend the full screen mode. Helps out a lot.
Oh, yeah. Look at that. Okay.
But yeah, I have some work in process shots, courtesy of that interview you did with Heaviest of Art. They did a really awesome write-up. So for anybody who hasn't checked it out, please do it. But this is the final piece here. You mind kind of talking a little bit about it? Maybe the process with the band, what you were thinking, all those kind of things.
Yeah, man. It's funny looking at it.
I hate it. No.
I'm pretty okay with this one. You know how it is, just spending so much time on something and then kind of stepping away from it for a while, and you see it again in different contexts that are not like your bedroom. And so this started when through doing planetary clairvoyance, I kind of just became friends with all those guys over the years. We kind of just kept in touch. They're great people. And so when they hit me up back in, I think it was like just about to be May, might have been like middle
of this year.
Yeah, middle.
Jesus, you weren't kidding about the tight timeline.
No, it was like the end of April, I think, and they were like, we're doing a new LP. I kind of had a hunch that they were, because like they didn't tell me any like big secrets or anything, but I knew that they had been like jamming, and they had put out a demo like, not too far before this, the Aperture of Body thing. And so I kind of assumed this was coming. I didn't know when, nor did I have any idea, obviously, that they would be wanting me to do it again. So Max, their drummer, got a hold of me and asked me if I wanted to do it. And yeah, I like I said, I was in the middle of that other big thing, but I knew that it would be foolish of me to not kind of drop everything to do this. So yeah, from like having no idea that it was happening to like being fully into it, was like a span of like one day, so yeah, we like got on the phone, I think that same day or maybe the next, and tried to go over concept. He walked me through some of the lyrical themes and things that he had been engaging with recently, like media wise, and typical conversation pretty much. But yeah, I had to get started really quick, and I kind of, is that lawnmower going to bother the?
It's really not that loud.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had to get started really quick, and I wasn't really sure what it was even going to be about. He sent me the music, like some unmastered tracks and the lyrics, and I kind of just listened to it a few times in a row and took some notes, and like, but I had to get painting like immediately because they needed it. I think they they were all super cool about it, but they initially wanted it in like 1 month from when I started, and I was like, and this is a pretty big painting too. It's bigger than Planetary was. This is on a 24 by 48 size canvas.
So, kind of show a little bit.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to get a sense of that scale. But like, that's effectively like the size of 8 LPs, like if you were to put them in sections of 4 and then those next to each other. So it's much larger than the actual record. But I knew just from talking to him and from lyrics and like knowing where they were at as a band and how the music sounded, it has this more sort of like sprightly, nimble, like agile kind of aspect to it. This more like refreshed kind of triumphant thing, you're not like down in the moldy slop anymore, or you're not on the like alien planet full of monsters anymore. All I knew was that I wanted to have this feel open and airy and like really breathable, and I kept thinking of like flight and like these like strange wings I kept picturing, which didn't really make it in. You can kind of see some on this like
the figure that draws all the attention, that perfectly encapsulates what you're talking about.
I'm glad you think so. For most of the process, I was just like, is this going to work? Like, is this, I don't know if this is going to like feel like anything to anyone, but I've been so flattered to see how well the whole project has been received. Like people like the art. And when you see people say that like it's a fitting image for the album, then like that's the best thing you can hope for. It's why I'm doing it. Is to complement the music, and for the most part, I think I succeeded. I did still want to include some of the more like goopy horror stuff, and actually it's funny, I don't think anyone has pointed it out to me, but surely some people have noticed that there's a little shout to the Planetary Clairvoyance like eyeball tower,
Well, with the center, if you're looking at just the front cover, the centered image,
right?
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, it's back in here, but it's kind of like deflated and like oozing and like spawning into other things.
It's like rebirthing. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, exactly. So I I remember asking them too, because like I didn't plan on putting that in there. I didn't want to be like, hey guys, it's planetary clairvoyance. Do you remember that? But the eyeball like just kind of popped up, in one of those moments of, I don't know, you see a brush stroke and you're like, oh, that kind of already looks like something, and it was that. So I remember asking the guys like, is this fucking like, is this corny? Like, should I get rid of that? And they're like, no, it's cool. We like it. So just leave it there.
Well, the thing that's cool about a lot of your pieces is there's so much detail, but there's always a center thing to latch onto.
Yeah, I'm always interested in how an artist chooses to like guide the viewer's eye around the picture plane. And this one again is kind of chaotic, but there are definite lines that you can follow through from one end to the other. So yeah, composition is important, and that's something I'm always striving for. But I don't, there might be like an academic definition of what makes good composition, which rules are there for a reason, and that's cool. I dig all that, but I think there's also an element of mystery to the composition of an image and whether or not it's going to work. And I don't have those answers, but it's fun to try to think a lot about composition and just, I'm always really thinking about that.
Well, I mean, you clearly mapped out 2-point perspective. You can see it on this left image here. So there's that thought process from the beginning. Sorry, I'm just kind of going off. I think what makes the composition work so well is you did the beginning math to then be creative on top.
Yeah, see,
that makes a big difference, man.
Yeah, and this is a rare instance where I did want to plan it out. Like I didn't sketch all this out, but I was like, I know that I want a wide 2-point perspective foundation for this, and I didn't follow it super tightly, but maybe like you're saying, when you do a little bit of that front end stuff, it can really impact the piece. You'll see these rigid perspective lines, and it's like it follows it fairly closely, but it's not like I have a bunch of super tight architecture. But when the eye is viewing this, you still understand that those lines are kind of undergirding everything. And I mean, that's perspective, that's how you make a space feel convincing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the most tempting thing to ignore, right? At least at first, because that was not fun, right?
It sucks. I have a weird relationship with doing like actual perspective work, because like it can utterly transform the way a painting feels, and it starts from the beginning. Like you have to start with that. I don't do it always. I didn't even know how to do it until I did the video game Norco, which that's another subject. But that was where I had to teach myself how to depict a 3-dimensional space, and it is through perspective that you do that. I mean, you can fudge it in other ways. You can still portray depth without necessarily employing super tight perspective. There's a million things you can do to make a convincing environment, but this is a very traditional and like foolproof way of doing that, I guess.
So are those, how are you doing those lines? Are they a pencil, like a white pencil, or are they
just paint?
Just a thin brush?
The way I do it is super janky, because I don't know. I don't know if there's an actual way to do this. I don't know how other people.
If you work on an illustration board, you could use like a white, like what do they call it? Conte pencil,
Yeah. The way I did this, and the way I've done a few other large scale paintings with perspective, is the first thing is you want to select your horizon line, of course, and then because where your horizon line is determines how the picture is going to feel, the things that you're focusing on, whether you want a foreground or a distant focus, so on, a million things. It kind of all starts with that horizon line. And so I just think about that and I get a big ruler out and make that first line. But then from there, like deciding where your vanishing points are going to be, these are both off of the canvas, obviously, to the left and right. So what I've been doing is I get these cardboard strips, like long cardboard.
That's how you have to do it, man.
Yeah. And
That's how you have to do it. And it's like, we got wings now.
Yes, exactly. And so on each side of this 48-inch wide painting, there are like these 25-inch cardboard strips that have like a little dot on them. And I'm like, that's where your vanishing point is. And I just taped them to the canvas. And then and this is where my engineering skills come into focus. I got another strip of cardboard and put a thumbtack into the one that was hanging off the side already. That's like determining where my vanishing point is. And then just using that extra cardboard strip to like, it's attached to the vanishing point, So wherever you move that up and down on the canvas, you're going to get a nice clean perspective line. And you just do that on both sides and like, you're good. It's kind of a pain in the ass because on a canvas that wide, you would need like a 80-inch, like ruler to do it up. So it's like, you got to get like part of the line on the canvas and then like take the cardboard off or have like another ruler. It's annoying as hell. It's janky, but it does work in the end. It's just not fun. I mean, that shit took like 6 hours or something stupid to like, to map all of it out. And like, but it works. It works.
Yeah.
So,
I feel you.
With digital, like working on the video game, it's like
much easier, right?
Oh my God, yeah, you bang that shit out in 30 seconds, and then you have like this perfect guideline for the whole piece. It's not like that in traditional. So,
I guess what are the parts of this painting that you like the most? If you were to like think about it objectively, like where do you think you succeeded the most?
I will start by saying that I wish I had been able to spend 50 more hours on this thing, but who knows?
But where?
Then I might have ruined it. One of the things that I was struggling with a lot in the end was the sky.
Yeah.
But I realize I'm drifting from your question here to just focus on negative. So
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I'm going to take a step back and say that I do feel pretty good about I feel pretty good about all of it, honestly. But the one part I do think that's pretty good is just kind of the front and center. I do feel like that central figure is like a nice mix of like, it kind of resembles a person who like has his hands up at his chest or something, but it's also alien looking, and it kind of has a touch of like this anime like mech thing going on a little bit, and that was kind of intentional, but I didn't want to like because that was an inspiration from Max,
the lighting on it's really cool too.
Thank you. And I wanted to have that backlit glow. But it's like I didn't want to fucking put like like a Gundam on the album cover.
Or some guns,
Might have been cool, but no, this is like kind of, I was just trying to like harness some of that energy, but like not have it feel obvious at all. But I like the look of that thing. I like the colors that sort of like warm cools and cool warms, the teal and that sort of fuchsia magenta thing going on. It's looks nice to me and works well with the water down below and those branches that kind of snake across it. I like all of that. I think I did all right with that. And the that sort of central focus, the figure that's reaching up with the orb and everything. That honestly, like the shape of that figure, because I'm horrible with anatomy too. Like I don't know what I'm doing. So it's like, I never learned all that stuff, and to really learn and get a firm handle on anatomy, like you can spend a couple years on that easy.
Well, spend your lifetime chasing it.
Like doing nothing else,
Yeah.
So it's never been like a huge focus of mine, which I'm okay with. But you start to get into trouble when you feel that you really do need a distinctly humanoid looking figure. So I'm always kind of like figuring out ways to fudge it,
It looks good. It looks in perspective too. The foreshortening on that arm figure there, like it's very convincing.
That's great because I that was one thing where like thankfully like I didn't have to belabor that figure like to the nth degree. I think it kind of like took shape like pretty easily. So that was good. The area behind the figure, it was a nightmare to figure out. I couldn't figure out the sky for the life of me, and that was kind of the last thing that I was doing. And I had taken a photo of it with the iPad and like done some really crappy digital sketches. Like I don't do digital at all, but like I do have Procreate on there just so like
figuring stuff out quick.
Yes, like a very crappy looking mock-up. And I remember sending the guys like 3 different versions. I'm like, none of them were like quite right, so I kind of mixed a couple of them together, and this was all like last minute. I was like in panic mode at that point. But in the end,
what was the problem you were facing? Was it coming up too much into the focus?
It was because I had the sky looking really flat initially, and sometimes I wish I had stuck with that.
Yeah.
I like how it turned out though, because I got some warmth in there, and you really need
the yellow's nice.
Yeah, you need a warm cool balance in some spots. You just do, because it was being dominated by these super cool, the whole sky was just like this teal color, and like it was a nice color, but like it just wasn't quite doing it for me. So, but then you start working in all this other stuff, and you're getting into the territory where you're like, fuck, I'm overworking this now.
Yeah,
it was just a lot of push and pull. A lot of the more simple, more like vaporous, cloudy, like simple looking things are often the hardest for me, because it's subtlety that you're chasing, and especially with acrylics sometimes too, because do you paint acrylic or oil at all?
No, I use watercolor and gouache. So gouache is nice because it behaves a lot like acrylic. You can just
it's skinny acrylic, right?
Yeah.
And then so with acrylic, a lot of times like you'll lay a color down and it'll darken after 5 minutes. Once it dries, it gets darker. So a lot of times when you're trying to do subtle like atmospheric things, it can be, I've gotten pretty good at it over the years, but it's hard to really dial in sometimes on like a particular zone of color and like operate at the edges of it and like have it all look good, so just lots of fussing around with the sky. And the whole right section of this got redone. Like that whole that big tree thing used to not be there at all until
right on the edge there.
Yeah, that wasn't in there until like that was like the last thing I did on this. I was just like, hope this works, but it mostly works. So it was a fun piece though overall. It was it had some life stuff going on in the middle of it unexpectedly, as it always does. But thankfully I was able to get it done in time. And I am proud of that piece. I like it.
You want to know my thoughts?
What do you think about the Enduring Spirit artwork?
I mean, I think it's exceptional. Number one. So I think the album cover pops. It's definitely getting a lot of attention. It's one of my favorite covers of the year for sure.
Thank you.
So there's the praise. I love how you did the planes on the cliffs in the middle there. I feel like that gives it that 3-dimensionality. And then I love how dark that kind of like carriage looking, morph is. Like, you weren't afraid to push the values, so you did a great job there. Mm-hmm. I think, like, if there's one thing maybe I would have done differently is the so before you get to the colored background, the distant part of like the cliffs near the kind of mannequin looking figure and the ones behind the eye figure, I would have made them less textured and distant.
Yeah, and that's exactly in that section.
That's like the one thing I would change.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about a bit ago about restraint. Knowing when to hyper detail an area, because obviously the more detail you pump into a section, the closer it pulls. If you feel like it's closer than it should be, and that like particular part of that range should be more subdued. It should be cooler. There should be, if I could do it again, I would have more of an overarching sense of that mistiness coming up from the water to kind of subdue some of that warmth a little bit more, and also to clear out some of that definition. Because you should be looking back into more atmospheric territory in that section.
Yeah.
I think the colors are nice there, but like it jumbles what you're looking at. It's hard to tell that like that's supposed to be more of a distant section back there. So yeah, I agree with you on that. I also like that you said carriage, because that's like kind of in my mind like what was happening with that whole.
Oh yeah, that's totally how I read it.
Like a weird flesh carriage or something.
Flesh carriage. Yeah, I'm working on a piece right now that I'm calling Flesh Castle. So I'm like, oh yeah, dude, similar minds.
Flesh everything.
No, it's a sick piece, and I hope you. I only mentioned the critique just because.
Oh no, man!
It's helpful to get second opinions sometimes, and almost to reinforce what you're already thinking.
Yeah, no, I don't take offense to it at all. I don't talk to people about making art very often, honestly. I don't have. I have acquaintances online, but like in my day-to-day life, I'm not talking about paintings, and like especially not my own, so like it's
valuable, man. That's why I'm doing the panels, is because we do a little peer critique, and it's been very helpful.
Yeah, it's good to have a back and forth. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So this is kind of like, what would you consider this, about like 50%, 60% done?
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah, there was I mean, you can kind of see what I was talking about with the sky there.
It does look pretty cool that way too.
It does.
You weren't wrong.
It does, yeah. And like this was, I love my traditional media. I don't know that I'll ever get into digital painting. Part of me feels like I should for like business reasons, but this is a situation where like I could have spent like 10 hours on two different versions of the sky, instead of being like, okay, well, shit, I already have committed to this big lumpy looking cloudy thing, and like now I got to see it through or paint over like the last fucking 20 hours of work, and so it's hard to make those decisions, and I do like how it looks here.
It's more Roger Dean-esque.
Yeah, I love Roger Dean.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I probably like, if I had more restraint, I probably like this here, what you're seeing, like this is not like presentable. It's not finished, but there is a restrained like core there that like I could have refined and like had it been this, but like just a more finished version of what's there. I don't really regret not doing that, but it's funny to look back on it because I'm like, maybe that would have been cooler. I don't really know.
Well, you don't have any darks in that sky, so it really works in the final for sure. But I see what you mean of like, there's just an airiness to this that's pretty cool. So I get you.
Yeah, and you can see there was a sort of like, I don't know, I was trying to do some more stuff on the right side where that tree is, like I mentioned. So, this piece overall came together pretty easily, in terms of like my wider idea of what it was going to be. But as so often happens, I feel like you'll get like 70% of the painting done in the first like 100 hours, and then like the next 100 hours is just obsessing over just stupid little shit. And that's how this one went. But
so we got Dream Unending. It's like a sigil logo type thing on the left, and then I don't know what the thing on the right is, but the color scheme and the I think you have a lot of restraint in this one.
Thank you.
It's really exceptional.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a couple points through my painting a career, I guess. I don't know, but like through my trajectory where I do feel like I've managed to like successfully create a restrained piece. And like, these are both pretty good examples of that. The one, the one on the left is for Derek from Tomb Mold's other project, Dream Unending. And that was a fun one to make, kind of just a quickie. He wanted a logo that was just like the initials, as opposed to like, your traditional metal font or anything. Like, I don't have much interest in doing any of that. So he wanted something that felt more, I think, sort of flowery and, Baroque looking. And that's what I came up with. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I kind of forget about that because it was a while ago, and it's not like an album cover or anything, but whenever I see it pop up, I'm like, oh yeah, that one was pretty all right. That turned out all right. I was working in oil then, which I only did for about a year and a half. I've since gone back to acrylic, but you can
speed.
Yeah. I do. I don't want to say I love oil. I guess I'll say that I hate both oil and acrylic.
I feel you.
Yeah, I'm partially in jest there. But yeah, they both have their pros and cons, of course. And the thing that I love about oil is how it handles, how it looks, how the colors stay true. It feels real. It made me feel like acrylics are a toy in comparison, which is unfortunate because every other aspect of oil painting drives me nuts, and I simply don't have the time for it. And like the mess, I also don't have the space for it. Like I was able to find a pretty good setup in terms of like chemicals and using like natural things that are more on like the natural alternative side that still work pretty well and like won't kill you eventually, maybe not as quickly. But like, even still, it's just, in terms of like cleanup and maintenance, and like, there's also a million more ways for you to like fuck up a painting by like doing it wrong, like with acrylic. I mean, there's things you can do wrong with any medium, but acrylic is forgiving. Oils are I don't know. I have infinite respect for people who are doing like big time oil paintings. I would maybe like to do that someday again, but I'd have to have more time and like maybe an actual studio in which to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see the difference kind of just in the background on this Dream Unending piece, how smooth it looks. Like those smooth blends are what is so wonderful about oils, the atmospheric effects.
Yeah.
Like if I had painted that Tomb Mold cover with oils, like the sky would have ended up differently, And then the one on the right, I think I titled this Absu Distributing the Sweet Water. This was not like something I planned. It just kind of popped up again, but there was the imagery, the water, the trickling water, which I feel like is kind of a motif in a lot of the things I do. But Absu being a Sumerian god that is associated with fertility and in particular fresh water. So that's kind of where that title comes from, I guess. It's not it's largely just like me screwing around, honestly. But yeah, that is one where I do remember intentionally trying to, again, be a bit more minimalist and more intentional with where I direct those areas of hyper detail.
I love the omission of like really dark darks.
Yeah, man.
Normally I'm really drawn to that stuff, but I think that would have killed this.
Yeah, and that's I think that's what gives a piece like this its dreamlike quality. There's like one or two other pieces I've done. It's that low contrast, right?
Yeah.
You have like a really set zone that you're working in, and you can move up in value. You can get pinpricks of light and everything, but once you add those deep shadows, it takes that fogginess away because if you're, when you're walking around in a foggy neighborhood, it's the middle of fall and there's effectively like a cloud on the ground, you're not going to see deep shadows. Like you won't. So I guess that's where that comes from. And I forget that all the time too, like I'll make a painting like that works.
Well, you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to make it more punchy, but then you lose that ethereal aspect. You're right.
Exactly. I'm always wanting to punch it up, like you said a minute ago, like punching up those values, like extreme dynamic range, and like not every piece needs that. So, I think the darkest dark in there is like maybe the area around the eyeball, and it's like, I don't know, it's like a mid-range blue basically, so, color and light.
Practicing in like watercolor is a good way of improving at that, like knowing kind of how far to go with it. Like at least that's how I can relate with it.
Yeah. I should probably try watercolors.
It's not very forgiving compared to acrylic.
Well, no, I admit I'm straight up like just afraid of them. I'm like, I don't, what am I going to do with those? But I should try.
You want any tips, man? I mean, I don't know shit about acrylic painting. I just know gouache, which has some similarities, but
pretty much the same. In fact, the way that I handle acrylics in terms of using them super thin, probably, I guarantee you could like transition from gouache to acrylic pretty quickly. But there's also kind of no point if, I can do what I do with like thin acrylics. You're basically already there as far as I'm concerned. So, in terms of employing the medium,
I think I enjoy, like currently I like mixed media because I try to reduce some of the things I don't like about each medium by, going between the two.
Totally.
Like, I think, man, I mean, I guess you're working on canvas or what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always canvas.
Yeah, so they would not translate as well, but like some of the like really high end like art colored pencils, man, they're a good tool for like finishing touches and like making things tight and stuff. Like I like it quite a bit.
Yeah, I've seen some of these like oil colored pencils that effectively seem kind of like somewhere between a pastel and a traditional colored pencil, and I'm like, that's probably pretty sick. I should check those out. So, again, like what I was saying an hour ago, like I would like to make more of an effort to branch out a little bit in different ways like that. Try some new things,
Well, I think the last point on this, if you were to pick up anything, given your skill level and your comfort level with like what you're doing normally, watercolor would probably teach you the best lessons, because with watercolor, think about a Frazetta painting, right? So his oils really just look like a more developed version of his watercolor studies that he does ahead of time. And what watercolor does so well is those soft transitions, those very complicated colors, because you can blend them on the paper as well as beforehand.
Yeah.
So working on like soft color transitions and things having that kind of like atmospheric quality, that's like a good way of learning through watercolor. And then the other thing too is combining shapes for composition. So once again, I'm not in any place to give out advice, but it's a good medium to learn things that other mediums maybe lend themselves for overworking. Watercolor, it can, but it's a different type of overwork.
Totally. Yeah. You're not wrong. I think I should probably give that a try. I mean, there's acrylic, you can get some of those atmospheric effects, and the blending, the smooth blends, like what you're saying about with watercolor, getting a real nice blend between two things. Like, of course, there are ways to kind of do that with acrylics, but it almost always involves some sort of like technique or maybe a medium. I sometimes will use like Golden makes a pretty good like retarder gel that slows the drying time, and then there's also a matte medium that I use too for like transparent glazing and stuff. You can sort of loosely emulate things that oils can do, but acrylic as such is like, depending on how you employ it, is not very forgiving. I mean, to bring up Michael Whalen again, guy does stuff with acrylic that I can't believe. I'm like, I seriously don't understand how you possibly wielded acrylic in such a smooth, beautiful way. But
well, I think, hey, dude, that's where this comes in, right?
Oh, baby, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can tell that that's what some of it is. And I have thought about getting one of those, but I haven't yet. So
I mean, it'll work perfectly with your process, and it is acrylic. But a lot of times when you see like that credit and it says acrylic, it's, a lot of acrylic airbrush.
Yeah. You can tell, and like I've been aware of that. So kind of in the back of my mind for the last couple of years, I'm like, airbrush, should I get one someday?
It's got its own learning curve, though, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, so we got mutually assured destruction, full cover on the right there.
Yeah,
got some Dore inspiration that was requested by the client, right?
Yeah. They, I think this was kind of like 2.5 years ago. This was like, I don't remember this process like super well. Obviously, I remember making it, but it was kind of a hectic time. I think I was working on this like as I was getting involved in making the video game. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between these two things, trying to focus on both of them. And I still mostly like how this painting turned out. Like, I'm not embarrassed by it or anything, but as far as like the thought process behind it and everything, like much of that has vanished from my mind. I do remember obviously that the main thing that they wanted to express with the cover in particular was this riff on Dore's Empyrean, and probably one of his more well-known pieces. And obviously I knew it, and so it felt a little bit daunting to be asked to do.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, let me just whip out a Dore piece. He's probably fucking rolling over in his grave, but I had fun with it. It ended up like not being as impenetrable as I thought. Once I allowed myself to just be like, it's not gonna look like the Dore, nor do I want it to. I'm just gonna kind of do this in my own way. And like I was saying about anatomy, like it's not something I do. So like the thought of a whole album cover that's like a circle of bodies, I'm like,
each individual body.
How in God's name am I going to do this? So, if you look closely at these figures, like they're loose, kind of just, I mean, you get it. They're
suggestions.
Exactly. And like, I'm pretty okay with that. Part of me feels like I really do need to like get my anatomy chops down. Like I understand the basics, of course, but like it's hard, man, making people. It really is. So
I really hope you don't leave this conversation more stressed out about all the things you're not doing.
No. I'm just trying to poke a little fun at myself, and in a way that's hopefully relatable to other artists.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
It's important to me that I don't want anyone, when they look at my work, to have this idea that I'm like this flawless, I don't know, I'm some guy, and I'm very much trying to figure out my own process and like what works and what doesn't. And I'm self-taught too, and I don't really know any better than anyone else other than the time that I personally have chosen to invest in this practice. And it's important for me to try to impress upon other people that like you can do this too. Yeah. You just got to apply yourself, and like I'm not even exaggerating with that. Like you can do it. Like trust me, people. And like so that's all I'm getting at when I kind of poke fun at myself a little bit. But yeah, this image, I do think it's still mostly worked out. It looks pretty cool. I kind of forget that I even did it sometimes. But yeah, the front was the Dore thing, and then I remember the back. He was like, we want just some like large, kind of like dark ruins, basically. And I'm like, well, I can do that. So that's I do recall them saying that they didn't want it to look like fantasy art, more along the lines of like apocalyptic biblical sort of thing, while also not being like actually like a Bible image, but more grounded in reality, I guess. And I think it's hard for me to like not have things kind of veer into the fantasy realm anyway, which this kind of did. But it's also not super out there. So, the band liked it. So,
well, it's like, at the end of the day, they look at your portfolio of what you've created. Okay, I'll take that in consideration, but you're still going to create stuff like you do,
Yes. Yeah. That's something I got to make sure people are clear on when they hire me.
Yeah.
I know I said that a while ago, but yeah, I'm like, you guys.
You have a very distinct style.
Yeah, I'm like, kind of what you're gonna get, and I assume that that's why you're coming to me. Like I am good at some things, and I'm really not good at other things. And if you want me to do something that I'm not good at, I'm going to tell you. If you still want me to do it, then then it's on you.
Yeah.
But I'll do it. And oftentimes those challenging things that I don't think I'll be able to do have resulted in some of my better paintings. So you don't want to shrink from a challenge. But I do want to be upfront about certain things like that. That like you might have an idea in your head as a client, and like what I end up with, it's going to look weird. It might not be what you were picturing, but hopefully it works out.
Yeah,
it usually does.
No, it's a killer piece. I think you did a really good tribute, man. So it's
Thank you.
Really awesome. I will say it's a bit different for a hardcore band.
Yeah.
So it is a bit. You wouldn't expect this to be a hardcore band's album cover, but it is different, and it's obviously extremely well executed.
Yeah, I mean, I respect them for wanting to go with something that's not explicitly. I don't think there's really anything like hardcore about this,
No.
But, that props to them. I think that's great, and I'm glad they hired me. So, yeah,
this one stuck out to me a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, that seems to have resonated with people for whatever reason. Some pieces just kind of hit for people and others don't. And this was one that did. And you can't really predict those things.
You really can't.
No. This was an oil painting too.
Okay.
You can probably tell the difference.
Actually, not as much as you might think, but that might be because I'm an idiot. But
no.
It looks pretty dang close, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's still me doing my thing, obviously, but I guess the most noticeable areas would be right behind that central figure. That sort of smooth transition.
Yeah, it is. It's a little more buttery.
Arms. Yeah, exactly. Buttery is the word. And like, unless you're extremely fucking good with acrylics, like it's just hard to do that with acrylics. So, you trade one thing for another, and that's kind of just the nature of different mediums. But
was this a personal piece or was this a commission?
Technically, it was a commission for a friend of mine in Chicago named Brad Roloff. Great guy who operates under the name Bread Press.
Okay.
He's a great guy. He makes cool stuff. And he had an idea for a character that like he had just sort of had in his mind for a long time. And he had drawn like a couple sketches and sent them to me. And really this was not like for the project or anything. He just wanted me to make him a painting. And I love doing that when people just want a painting. I'm like, hell yeah, I will gladly do that for you. And so, yeah, the figure, all I really knew about it was he was calling this figure the gatekeeper in his mind. And it was a guy, well, not a guy, but it's an entity that's like a cloaked thing, but like with nothing inside of it. And he's kind of pulling it open to show some sort of strange other world that's in there. And that was really kind of the only prompt, other than like, kind of weird fantasy landscape with like an archway or like something to signify that like you're approaching a threshold of some sort. And I have no idea where this came from. I think this was definitely just a start painting and see what happens kind of thing. And that's what I mean when I say that like you really can't predict what people are going to latch onto or not. So it's best to like try to not think about that,
Well, so you had those notes going in, and I mean, you must have thought of the archway pretty early on.
Yeah, and that's something that I find myself. You'll see like little archways in all sorts of my pieces because I just kind of like. I like how they look, obviously, and they function symbolically too, if you want to look at it that way. And they're a nice way to just like frame a subject too. Love a good archway. So
direction of the light as well. It's a good indicator of that.
Yeah, then it's kind of backlit. I think the source of light is kind of confusing because like you have some of that warmer light coming from that like egg-shaped thing in the sky, but then there's also this sort of diffuse, cooler light coming from above that up in those blue clouds. I try to make the light kind of convincing because that's another thing that will define a space and make it seem real. But also like I'm not traditionally trained on it. Like it's just stuff I've felt out through like thinking and practicing. And so something I hope to continue improving upon, because I think when you have, for the things that I'm trying to do, when you have a strong sense of light, like that can make or break whether or not your painting succeeds, So
it's a pretty cool book that you might want to check out if you feel like it. James Gurney, guy did Dinotopia. Yeah, do you have that?
I do.
That's a very helpful book, and it's I gotta turn on my big brain to read it because it's like each page is so much to it that it's like nice. I could kind of get overwhelmed if I'm not doing it very regimented. But
he's a wonderful teacher.
Yeah.
I wish I could like take a class with him or something, but he really lays it out, and
he's got a good YouTube channel too.
Oh, no shit. Okay.
Yeah, he teaches a lot of good classes on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah, he's got that Color and Light book, and then Imaginative Realism as well.
Yeah, they're both like $20. I got both of them.
Yeah, they're great resources though. And it's funny that you bring up Color and Light because earlier in the year, before I kind of got so busy like I am now, I had like taken a couple days, and I was intending to like go through that book on a very deep level and like try to work with it and like do some practice stuff, because I never do practices. I never do sketches. I'm always working on like something that will be a finished painting,
Right.
So I was trying to like do some of that, but then I got sidetracked by doing like actual work again. So I keep coming back to this motif of needing, wanting some sort of space at some point to kind of like try to discover like the next phase of what I'm doing. I'm not like being tormented by this because it's all a process, but
yeah,
it's on the radar of mine. I'll say it that way.
Well, every artist I've talked with that has consistent projects says the same thing, so you're not alone in that.
Yeah, sure.
All right, then we have Planetary Clairvoyance, of course. Which, this is like kind of your big break in a lot of ways, right?
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, it was the first thing I did that anyone, on a wider scale had like paid attention to and said nice things about. And Tomb Mold at the time, they've only grown in popularity, of course, but the reception to this when it came out, I remember was like really kind of shocking. And I just like couldn't believe that I was a part of that one.
We had to follow a Brad Moore painting too,
Yeah, man, I know the painting for Manor, I feel like has already become a sort of like.
That's a classic too.
Yeah, Yeah, it's like a modern. It slots into like that long lineage of like classic metal album artwork, metal album artwork, and it's only been like 6 years or something, but it feels like it's one of those pieces that has always been there,
Yeah.
And so, and I knew that like going into Planetary, I'm like, what am I gonna do, But I somehow this worked out. I don't know. I still think it's pretty good. There's the one thing I don't like is colors and values both could have been like dialed way up, because it's, if you step back and just kind of like blur your eyes a bit, it's like he just kind of looks like a mess. But overall, I definitely don't hate the piece. And there's some atmospheric things in there, like the little glowing touches of light and stuff that like I'm surprised I was able to pull off back then. So that's cool to see that. I don't really look at this piece in detail too often. I don't go back super often. So.
Well, so when I first saw this, obviously I never even talked to you. I mean, my impression was, holy shit, this guy's a pro, and what else has this guy done? And then I tried to do some digging, and I can't find anything. But like, it came out of nowhere. So my perception of it was, this dude like really knows what the hell he's doing. And it's funny that you're like, oh yeah, you still felt more like a novice at this point, but this is
absolutely,
it's still a fantastic piece. I mean, I think, without the eye in the center, though, you wouldn't really have as much to latch onto. So that was a smart decision. This res file you gave me too looks way better than the one I just like screenshotted. So
this I sent you the like for both of them, like the actual files that I sent to the band and the label. Like, so
it makes a big difference, because the one I would had, it had too many highlights and it was reading more flat than it actually is. I don't know where I got that from.
I couldn't tell you, but it's crazy what a proper high res file will do for you. So despite my minor technical misgivings that I might have with this piece, I'm still proud of it, and it now occupies a space in my mind as like it's something nice to look back on. I'm just always grateful that it happened, and it's like baby's first proper commission, it gives me like a warm, cozy feeling, it's like, oh, Planetary. It's nice to see that. So yeah.
That's great, man. Oh yeah. And then let's talk a little bit about Norco.
You can see the difference though between this and Planetary, and like flip back and forth, like just how much more that this Norco piece pops. And it's not, obviously not every piece needs to have the same things going on, but like I think by this point I had started to develop a better sense of color and value, and also color temperature, and how those are tied into value and light as well.
And all that becomes identity. I mean, this is more of your identity, I think, than this at this point.
Yeah, this definitely does feel kind of more like me. I mean, for Planetary, that's a job. I was definitely cranking up the like fucked up alien creature dial, to like to make it work for that album cover. And with this Norco piece as well, like I was fully working with another person's ideas. But he did give me the freedom to kind of depict it how I want. Like the characters are still going to be themselves and like wearing their outfits and so on. But I had a pretty great degree of like how I wanted to use color and so on. And of course it ended up as this, I don't even know what to call this style. It's definitely like one of my louder paintings, but it works for the game.
It's a little more that kind of lowbrow pop surrealism.
Yeah,
it's a little more of that.
Yep. Yeah. This was this is an oil painting too.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, you can kind of see some of that in the sky. It's still me. I still do the same shit, but in areas where there might be like blends and stuff is where you can see the difference. Man, what can I even say about this?
Well, I don't know anything about Norco. So
Okay.
what is it exactly?
Very broadly, I try to figure out how to explain this without rambling for half an hour. Was there was a guy I followed on Instagram, Geography of Robots. He posted these. You know what pixel art is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was posting pixel art renditions of like locations in the South, um, largely centered around this town called Norco, which is a refinery town. It's actually an acronym. It basically stands for New Orleans Refining Company.
Okay.
One of these places that, long ago, like grew out of plantation land and became oil, and it's, in it's tied into the landscape completely. It sort of defines the landscape. The town is built around it. People's lives are inextricably tied to this great, monstrous oil refinery. It's a complicated relationship that the creator has with this thing, and he grew up around it. But so he was making these really attractive art pieces about all of this, and I thought they were cool, and I followed him for years, and I didn't really even know that he was making a video game out of this. But long story short, he got a hold of me and asked if I would do what's known as key art for this video game, and that's effectively just promo art. Like the art you're going to see on like the splash page or for like marketing materials or whatever, like the big cool illustration.
Unlike the cover, if it was an actual physical video game.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was confused because I'm like, what does my like weird fantasy art have to do with like pretty realistic depictions of like Louisiana, And he told me about this game he was making that was very much about the day-to-day, grounded in reality lives and struggles of the people that live and work there, but also mixed with some pretty cool, heady, like kind of Philip K. Dick or William Gibson type sci-fi concepts as well, all sort of mixed into this thing. And the more he described it, I was like, well, this is not like visually what I usually do, but I love all these ideas, and this is such a fascinating project. So, he's the guy, the director of this game. He was going by the pseudonym Yuts at the time, Yuts. He directed the game, so I'm not gonna give his real name or anything, but that's who was behind all of this ultimately. But the ideas he had for this thing were so attractive to me. And one of these is like this sentient piece of like this viral technology that ends up fusing with the bayou and like infecting the living organisms and like the trees and the birds and stuff. And so you can kind of see this in the painting,
Right.
These mechanical and organic things like merging like in a material sense and not just a thematic sense. And yeah, so that's a very broad summary of kind of what the game is about. And
Very intrigued. It's a PC game, right?
It's a PC game. It's also available on PlayStation and Xbox. A lot of people wanted it to show up on the Nintendo Switch. It hasn't yet. I don't think it's going to. It was supposed to. Blah blah blah. But right. It's out there. It's like widely released. We were hoping to make another game after it, which who knows what the future will hold. But effectively, right now, that's like not in the cards.
Have you played the game?
Oh yeah. I played the shit out of the thing. I actually ended up. I had to stop painting for most of the year actually, because that's the second part of this painting story is like I did this painting. I became friends with them. Like they got me into their Discord so we could like chat more easily and like this was just like a couple of guys making this thing, but I became friends with them, and through that process, they ended up asking me to do art for the game itself. Yeah, exactly, all this pixel art, which I had no training on. I didn't know a thing about it, but I had grown close to them at this point, and like they wanted me in on the project, and like I wanted in. I was like, well, yeah, I want to make a video game with my friends, of course.
Yeah.
And they had a publisher lined up and everything too. So like I was being paid for this. Like it was like a real gig, so of course I'm not going to say no to that. It was a funded project, and it's like a dream thing, who wouldn't want to do that? So I quit my grocery store job to do this. And I was, for the first couple of months of the project, I was still trying to balance painting commissions. I had it in my mind that like Norco, working on the pixel art, I can do that for like 8 hours a day, and that's my day job, and then I'll continue painting like always on the side. So like effectively nothing's changed, but the project grew to sort of a frenzied state, and like the scope grew out of control, and timelines are looming, and like pretty quickly I realized like I don't have time to paint. I need to stop painting in order to make this project what it needs to be. So we all just like went full in on Norco the main dude and his like coding partner, like the main guy had this project in the works for like 5 years before I had even joined on. I came in like in the last year, and initially like I was going to just help him fill out like some of the last remaining scenes, like things that he might not be able to get to. But once I started working with him and understanding the medium of pixel art more, we kind of, because he was working on the pixel art by himself before. Right. So once I got involved, this kind of interesting cyclical process started forming between us, where like he was teaching me how to do this stuff, or like how to maybe translate my painting chops to this medium, which like in some ways it's direct, but others it's like just totally different. But we were kind of like inspiring each other. And so like as I was learning from him, I was developing my own style and like causing him to go back and reiterate on older pieces that he had already had. And so like effectively within the span of less than a year, like we'd kind of changed like the entire art style of like the whole game. And it like, I'm really happy that we did it. But oh my God, like I don't think any of us have ever worked that hard on anything in our lives. I mean, I can say that it was absolutely nuts. You'll hear about the idea of crunch a lot in the video game industry, and like people being worked to the bone, and like it's just common within video games. But we were doing that, but like nobody had a gun to our head. It was all because we knew that like this is possibly a once in a lifetime thing to have like a real published video game like actually get released, and like critics are reviewing it. It's like it's on Steam, people are playing it, so we had to give it all we got, for this opportunity. And then we wound up working for I don't even know how many months in a row, like from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, like no joke, just like fucking sitting at the computer clicking pixels like nonstop. It was nuts. Just a crazy experience. I don't regret it at all, though. Norco might even be the thing I'm like most proud of artistically overall. Which is kind of funny to say, because it's this thing that like it doesn't have much to do with my paintings. I haven't done pixel art since we finished Norco, so like I've effectively forgotten how to do all of this shit. It's a weird little artifact of like the specific time.
Almost feels like a dream, it's like a chapter.
Yeah, I always say that. I'm like, I look back on Norco, it's been out for almost 2 years now, and like it just feels like a weird dream, but one that I am just so grateful to have been a part of. It was just just a wild experience. And it was a shit ton of work, but yeah, it's different when you really have a team who all cares about it so much, it's less of a grind then. And like, you might feel psycho, but like you're all in it together. So it's nicer that way. But yeah, that's Norco in a nutshell, I guess.
That's really cool, man.
If you're into video games, look it up.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have to be intrigued for the storyline, and I like the art. I don't play video games nowadays, but I definitely want to like maybe look up some like YouTube, maybe some people playing it, because that would kind of be similar
there's
for me.
some of that out there. I know a lot of people did playthroughs, and there was actually a friend of the director's who was from the region, who played through the whole thing, did like an annotated stream basically, where he went like super in depth into all of the regional minutia, and like really explained, because this thing, like the creator is really big on, he can't take himself out of the history of this place, and what it all means. And like, so this game is, for people who are from the region, is like packed with little references and things that are universal, but things that will hit harder for people who are from that place. And it's been so nice to have people, comment on the things we've done and say like, I'm from that area. And like, it's just like totally surreal to see my little neck of the woods like represented in a video game. Like, who would do that, And so it's really made me feel really good to, make something like that for people, for a really niche audience kind of. I will say, if anyone does check this out, be prepared, because it is mostly reading. It's mostly it's story based. Like you click around, but there's basically no gameplay to speak of, or it's very light. You don't have to be like good at video games to play this, but so if you like reading and you like atmosphere and art, then maybe check it out. But yeah, there's my pitch.
Okay, man, got me interested. I think this is the last slide. Okay. These just conveniently worked really well in the deck, and I just really loved them. So were these after Planetary Duality, kind of like 2018, 2019, 20?
Yeah, these, I think the top one was more recent. I think that was 2020 maybe.
Okay.
I think the bottom one was 20. I think, actually I think the top one was maybe like 21 and the bottom was 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are done for a label known as Cadabra Records. Very cool guy doing a cool project, and his whole thing is, his name is Jonathan Dennison, and he started this a while back. The whole thing with this label is doing real nicely produced productions of these famous old horror stories from like the weird fiction genre. So your Lovecraft and all of his associated contemporaries, Ambrose Bierce, and things like that. And so these two.
So these album covers, gatefold.
There, yeah, and so they're a little bit thin because they're formatted in a way for there to be like black bars on the top and bottom, and like that was just the layout that they went with. So there's, on the actual record, there's like text on the top and bottom of each of these.
Got it.
But yeah, the top one is for the story. It's for Randolph Carter and the Unnameable on the right and left, respectively. Statement of Randolph Carter is that story. It's a pretty quick, short one, but basically I'm painting the famous scene from there where like one guy goes down into this mausoleum to like see what's down there, and of course there's some unknown horror there, but he's got this Randolph sitting there with like what is effectively a telephone going down into the ground, like waiting to hear from the guy that he was with. And then the thing on the left It's just kind of what I extrapolated from like a pretty loose description of a monster that's in that story. I mean, making a big messy monster is just kind of like, you just slap some shit together. It's pretty good.
It looks cool.
Yeah, but that's monsters for you. As far as the painting itself goes, this I don't love it. There are things that I do like about it. I like the nice. I think the color temperature in this is nice. If you kind of just like skim your eye along the top of it and move from the orange and red into the purple and blue to those more subdued greens on the side, like that's a kind of nice effect. But this is a fine example of kind of going overboard on the details, especially on like the central left portion where it's kind of like a grave mound or something, and there's all these leaves and vines, and like it looks fine, but it's also kind of like just undefined, kind of like slop. There's nothing in there that like really pops out to me.
Right.
I still think it's a decent piece overall, but that would be my own personal critique on that one. And I guess kind of similarly on the one down below it. Now this is one. A piece for another Lovecraft story called The Festival, which kind of one of his lesser known shorter stories, like not one of his big famous pieces, but plenty in there to draw on in terms of visual inspiration. So yeah, I could kind of explain that, but basically it's a guy finds himself into it's all very typically Lovecraftian, but guy finds himself in like strange town full of fucked up people, and they like, he's basically escorted into this like giant fungal chamber underground where there's like, the cloaked cult members who are all doing a ritual, and they're holding the book up, and there's like monsters coming out of this green portal and all of this stuff, and there's these. Then they all like ride away on these giant bird creatures at the end. It's really just like a goofy like 5-page like, wouldn't it be crazy if this happened? Like it's a neat little story, but it's basically just kind of like imagery, but it made it pretty easy to like concoct a painting from. And the only thing in this that is like completely lifted from the story, I think, is kind of in the center of the piece where you can see this guy like taking a mask off. That's what that's supposed to be. In the story is like, the people are described as having like strange looking faces, but of course, your narrator comes to find out that they're just masks, like, ooh. And so at one point one of the cultists like takes his masks off, and it's like this, the horrifying moment when he sees the undescribable thing beneath it. And so, it's fun to make stuff that is, straight up monster territory. It's not really like, in my personal work, like I'm often trying to do things that feel like a little bit more than like just, hey, here's a creepy, screwed up looking monster. But it is definitely fun once in a while to do a project that is like strictly genre oriented. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like maybe your time in Norco made you value reality more and get less interested in stuff like this?
Yes and no. In Norco is weird because it's very much about a lot of real things, but it's really surreal too. And like he gave me a lot of freedom to work that flavor of mine like into what is effectively a story that like takes place in a city and suburbs. Like these are not fantastic environments, but like they can be made to feel that way. And that's something that I'm kind of glad you brought up, because it's something that I've been thinking about since Norco, and something that I also just think about in my day-to-day life is, I'm always going to be doing paintings that like have that more fantastic bent to them, or like doing a fantasy environment, like it's inside of me. You know, I'm not gonna ever make a truly concerted effort to move away from that. But
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Norco did kind of like make me look at the world a little bit differently, or it strengthened or intensified this feeling that I've always had, that like is that kind of sounds really kind of just dumb, but like everything can be weird if no matter where you are, if you look at it in the right way, if you think about it in a certain way, if you know, like I live in the suburbs basically. It's a normal little neighborhood, but it doesn't matter. You know, if you go out at night for a walk and you put yourself in a strange mindset, suddenly everything looks a little bit weird. You know, you might see a trash can in the darkness that kind of suggests something else. And there's this weird untapped quality, I think, in more day-to-day reality that I am really interested in trying to hang my style upon. And so it's kind of where I want to go next, like personally. But I've been doing work for people. But when I have the chance to try to like really figure out more of my personal stuff again, like there might be some more of those grounded things. You know, I'm not ever going to make like a plain painting of like a city intersection. Like that's not what I'm on about, but maybe you know what I'm getting at, I think, you know?
Yeah. Well, even if you were to do that, you'd have enough interesting lighting choices or color choices that it would be a different version of it. So,
sure. Right. Yeah. There is
exaggerate,
that, you know, yeah, you can't escape yourself, you know, like no matter what you paint, it's going to look like you anyway. So, yeah, I'm hoping to go down that road soon.
Well, I'm excited to see it.
Good.
Last question on my end. I appreciate all your time today.
Oh, no, this has been fun.
And we've talked a lot on it, but I like to wrap up with just, you know, one piece of advice for someone who's interested in creating art commercially. Maybe it's in albums and music and heavy metal. Maybe it's even broader than that. But what would be something that's kind of sticking with you to share? Yeah,
generally speaking, I guess, you know, I can't really direct any specific advice towards like getting hired for making album covers. Because I've done like 4 of them, you know, I really haven't done much, but in a general sense, and I do think like this leads one to opportunities eventually. You know, if you're trying to make art, technical skill is great, knowledge is great, school maybe is great. I didn't go to school, you didn't go. We can both make fully formed art pieces, and it's fine. You have to find your own way, and you have to be willing to accept yourself and your own journey with it all. And the biggest, like, it's the most obvious thing, but be patient. Like, patience is the artist's tool. That's it, man. You know, if you don't have the patience with yourself, like, you're never gonna make anything, because you have to be willing, when you're in the early stages, to make things that are not very good. You have to be willing to admit that and accept it, and to make some things that kind of just suck for like 2 years, you know? And like a lot of people aren't prepared to do that. And I don't say that as like, you know, I'm the cool guy. Like I've got the mental fortitude. But, you know, you do have to be ready and accept that, like, you're going to probably hate the first shit that you make. And like, it's an absolutely necessary part of the process. And if you're, I guess, to take that further, like, yeah, it's patience, but it's also like, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of those mistakes, and just be kind to yourself, and know that if you have that compulsion to make things, you should really try to follow it and take a good crack at it, even if you get discouraged. And I think that kind of loops back into your question, where it's like, how do you, you know, give somebody.
Now it's louder.
Oh yeah.
No, it's fine. It's just like
yeah.
I'm hearing it just come closer and closer and closer.
Be yourself.
Yes.
Make good work that you like. Don't chase things. And if you make things that feel true, other people will notice. And like that's, I mean, that I don't have like professional advice. That's how anything that I've been able to do has happened, is just from trying to stay true to what I want to do. And, you know, eventually maybe some people will like it too. But yeah, don't give up. That's the basis of it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you so much, Jesse. Stay around just for a minute. For everybody watching, please like and subscribe. You know, obviously follow Jesse Jacobi on Instagram. It's Pit of Bones. If he has any gallery showings, any art sales, keep an eye out. And beyond that, new episodes every other week. Appreciate everybody. See you.
Thank you.